Hello, my lovelies, and welcome to Where the Road Rises with me, your host, Eileen Curlin-Walsh. We have an interesting and timely subject for you today. All of us feel the pinch of our Cook County property tax bill twice a year, and while we accept the bills that come with property ownership, none of us wants to feel that our property is overassessed. And if we think our bill is too high, we have recourse, and that's what we'll discuss today with our guest, Cook County Board of Review Commissioner Dan Patlak. Dan has tremendous experience in property tax assessment. He is on his third term as the Cook County Board of Review Commissioner. Prior to that position, he was Wheeling Township Assessor. He also served 8 years at the Board of Review as the Assessment Appeals Analyst for Commissioner Maureen Murphy. He's a certified assessment officer, a champion of empowering taxpayers through education and communication. And we are delighted to have him join us today. Welcome, Dan.
Thanks, Eileen. Glad to be here.
Well, why don't we start by telling us a little bit about you, your background, how you come to the Board of Review?
Well, I wasn't always a Board of Review Commissioner. I actually started out as a real estate broker, and I worked in a real estate office in northern Cook County for 10 years. But then I was allured by the draw of public policy, and I started getting more involved in that. Eventually, I got hired by a former state rep from Evergreen Park by the name of Maureen Murphy to be her communications director and also an analyst for her at the Board of Review. So I worked for her for 8 years. I worked residential files, commercial apartment, and exempt properties. And then shortly before I left the Board of Review, I became, as you mentioned earlier, the township assessor in Wheeling Township, where I was elected twice before I ran for Board of Review, and fortunately was elected by the people in the 1st District.
Yeah, congratulations. And maybe just tell us, why do our property taxes go up, and why do they go up every 3 years?
Well, sometimes they go up every year, not just every 3 years, but it's the assessment that typically goes up every 3 years because the Cook County assessor reassesses 1/3 of Cook County each year. So for instance, in 2018, he reassessed the city of Chicago. This year, he's reassessing the northern suburbs. Next year, he'll reassess the southern suburbs, which includes Palos Township.
Right here.
But to answer the more specific question about the property taxes typically go up because the taxing districts that we pay into, mainly our schools, but also the village and the park district, the library, the township, fire protection district, they raise their levies most years. So in other words, the levy is the amount of money they're asking for. So if you have the same taxpayers, but you have a greater demand for money each year, your taxes are going to go up. The only determination of how much they go up compared to your neighbors is how much does your assessment go up. The assessment is the relative share of your overall, or it represents the relative share of your overall tax burden. So if yours went up 10% and I live next door to you and mine went up 20%, that is my assessment and your assessment, my taxes would go up more than yours.
And how do we know if we're overassessed?
Well, there's a variety of things you can look at. The number one reason people appeal at the Board of Review is called lack of uniformity. And all that really means is that, say, your house compared to other similar homes in the area is assessed higher. So you can find out what your assessment is by going online, and you can do it through a website that we put together recently called danpatlak.com, and sort of a one-stop shop. You can use it to go to all other websites that have to do with property taxes, but you can use that one, go in, find out what your assessment is, and then what you want to do is you want to figure out what's my assessment per square foot of living area compared to others' assessments of similar properties. I'll give you the formula for it.
Okay.
It's not very hard, and if you can't remember, just go back to that website and you can see some videos where I explain exactly how to do it. You take your assessment, it's divided into 2 parts, land and building. Take the building portion, divide it by your building square footage. So let's say your total assessment was $25,000. The land was $5,000 and the building was $20,000. Now let's say your house was 2,000 square feet. You divide the building assessment, $20,000, by the building square footage, $2,000, and you get 10. Now you know your assessment per square foot. So the next question you have to ask is, what's everybody else assessed at that has a house like mine? Now, if you do your research and you find out that everybody's at 10 or 11 or maybe 950, you're probably pretty fairly assessed. But if you find that there's a pattern of homes at $9, $8, $7, $6 a square foot, that's the evidence that you would want to use to turn into my office, the Board of Review, to show that there's a lack of uniformity and that you should get a reduction. So that's the number one reason people use for filing an appeal. Now, the next reason is called market value. So the Cook County Assessor places a market value in every property. So let's just say, Eileen, that he said your house was worth $400,000. But you're a pretty savvy person. You know what houses have been selling in your area, and you know they're only selling for about $300,000. You could file an appeal, and instead of turning on information about the assessed value, you'd turn in information about homes in your area that have sold recently, homes like yours, but have sold for less than what the assessor says your house is worth. And if we agree that evidence on home sales supports your argument that your market value is too high, we can grant you a reduction. So those are two of the major reasons. If you want me to go into more, I can, but...
Well,
yeah.
Even those two reasons do sound a little complicated. Does that mean that everyone who wants to file an appeal needs an attorney?
Absolutely not. The rule at the Board of Review is if you're filing property that's incorporated, which is most commercial or industrial properties, you do have to be represented by an attorney. However, most residential property owners do not have to hire an attorney. They may hire an attorney. That's an option for them. And the truth is about 70% of the people do. But I'm here to tell you, hiring an attorney is a convenience. The attorneys that are in this business usually do a good job. But it's a convenience, and you do have to pay for that service, and it's a service that you can probably do on your own. And if you can't do it on your own, if you live in the suburbs, you can go to your local township assessor, and they will help you file your appeal, both at the Cook County Assessor's Office, which is not my office, and then subsequently at the Cook County Board of Review, where I'm one of the 3 commissioners.
And that's terrific news, because for most people, they feel, what's the point in, even if they are overassessed and going through the process, if they're going to lose most of it to the attorney who helps them. So while it's a little complicated, you can do it and you can get some help.
Yeah, and it's worth doing. I mean, if you file an appeal and we turn you down, it didn't cost anything.
Oh.
You know, I mean, we don't charge a fee to file an appeal at the Board of Review. But if we grant a reduction, you may save $100, you may save $1,000, you may save several $1,000s, depending on what the reduction is, and that's well worth the few hours you might put into to doing the research and filing your appeal at the Board of Review.
So it's more about time than it is a very complicated equation.
Absolutely.
So what is the taxpayer who's prepared to put in the time, feels overassessed, and is going to do this themselves? What's the first step? Could you maybe talk us through the steps to getting to a hearing?
Well, the first 2 places you file an appeal, first you file at the Cook County Assessor. Now, you're not required to appeal there, but you may. You can file at the Cook County Assessor, and the assessor has a certain time period when he opens for different townships. So the time period normally lasts for 30 days. And you can find out the assessor's schedule actually by going to that website I mentioned, danpatlak.com, and you can find out his dates and deadline schedule. And during that time period, you can file with the assessor online. They also have a paper complaint form that you can get on their website, and you can mail in the complaint. Now, if you file at the assessor and you don't get a reduction, you can file at the Board of Review. If you file at the assessor and you do get a reduction, you can still file at the Board of Review and potentially receive an even bigger reduction.
So Dan, can I take a couple steps back? What is the difference between appealing at the assessor's office and appealing to the Board of Review? They're different, correct?
Well, they're 2 different offices. The Cook County Assessor is Fritz Kagi. It used to be Joe Barrios. The main job of the Cook County Assessor is to assess all properties in Cook County, but they also have an appeal process. The main job of the Board of Review is simply to review appeals filed by aggrieved property owners who think the assessor got it wrong. So you have 2 chances to appeal, although you don't have to take both of them if you don't want to. So I was going to say, if you were to skip the opportunity at the assessor, that's okay. You can still come to the Board of Review at a later date. We open by township as well, but we won't open a township until the assessor has completely finished adjudicating any appeals that have gone to him for that particular township.
And is that the typical the journey? First the assessor's office and then the board of review?
Well, many people go to both offices, but some people don't. Some people go to the assessor, they get a reduction, they're satisfied with it, they don't need to go any further. Others choose not to go to the assessor for whatever reason, or they may forget, but they still have their opportunity at the board of review. And again, you can go to danpatlak.com, and as we are opening townships for appeal, you can see what's open. You can also sign up on that website for our newsletter, so that when your township opens for appeal, we're automatically sending you an email letting you know your township is open on this date, it's going to close on this date, here's the evidence deadline, and you've got the information you need to make sure that you make a timely filing at the board.
And that's great news, because all of us want to know when and how we can appeal our taxes. So who runs the board of review, and how busy are you?
Well, the Board of Review is run by 3 elected commissioners. Each of us represents a separate geographic area. Each represents about 1.7 million constituents. My district is mostly suburban, and it's the largest geographically of all 3 districts, and it stretches, if you can imagine Cook County in the east, New Trier, where Kenilworth, Glencoe, Wilmette, Winnetka, that's where my district starts. It goes due west and includes almost everything west of it. So you've got Northfield Township, Wheeling, Palatine, Barrington, Hanover, the entire northern area. But then it goes down south and it heads through Leiden Township. I've got much of Proviso, Lyons, Lamont, Palos, Orland, Worth, parts of Bremen, Rich, Bloom, and even parts of Thornton Township. So it's a very big township. But there are 3 commissioners, and we work together to make the rules and make sure that the homeowners and other property owners who file at the Board of Review get a fair hearing and a fair review of their appeal.
Right. And can you appeal more than once, or is it just a one-shot deal?
Well, you can appeal once each year with a Cook County assessor and once each year at the Board of Review. And you mentioned about volume. Our volume continually goes up. So just to give you an idea, the first year I worked at the Board of Review in 1999 as an analyst, we had approximately 60,000 appeals. This year, we had our 4th record year in a row, and we had 245,000 appeals. And we're doing it with just about the same number of employees, actually maybe a few less employees, but we've instituted better management and we've instituted much better technology to help us do our jobs faster and more efficiently. And
Dan, you said there's no fee. There's no fee for appealing.
Appealing is free, as it should be. No property owner who thinks that he or she is overassessed should be in a situation where they actually have to pay to get justice.
Gosh, that makes sense. And what are the timelines and the deadlines, the opening and closings of townships? Is that just the length of time, that window that's open that we can appeal? That's our time to appeal.
That's your time. And Palos may have a much different time than Barrington, which may have a different time than Orland Township. So it's all different times, although the times are typically a 30-day period. You can appeal starting this day. Your last day comes. If you miss that deadline, then it's too late.
Okay. And so the taxpayer is filing by themselves, they're within the timeline, and they have a hearing. What do they typically bring to the table?
Well, first, if you want to have a hearing, you can have one, and you simply indicate that by either checking off the box on the paper form that you file or checking off the appropriate box when you file electronically. So if you ask for an in-person hearing, you'll get a letter or an email. It'll inform you when the hearing is. You come downtown to the Board of Review. We're located at the County Building, 118 North Clark. We're on the 6th floor. And we encourage everyone to send their evidence in ahead of time. Everything at the board now for the last 4 years has been digitized. So you can create your own file, you can register your own account, and then you can go online and upload any evidence that you have. If you can't do that, or if you don't know how, you can mail us your paper evidence and we will scan it into the system so that when you come in for the hearing, our analysts will be able to sit and look at a monitor and see all of your evidence and discuss that with you. And you can have some interaction with the first person that's going to review your appeal. Now, most appeals are done on the evidence Most people don't ask for a hearing. In that case, you can upload your information electronically or just mail it in to us.
Oh, so you're saying if you send in your evidence, which we'll discuss in a second, you don't necessarily have to show up at a hearing?
Oh no, that's completely your option. Matter of fact, you only get a hearing if you ask for one. And then I will tell you, 2 out of 3 people who ask for a hearing never actually show up for it. And we don't penalize anyone for that. If they don't show up to the hearing, we simply look at the evidence that they've sent in and adjudicate the appeal based on what we have available to us.
And what does that evidence look like? What is it typically made up of?
Well, if it's a uniformity argument, it's information detailing the assessment per square foot of similar homes in the area. If it's market value, it's information about homes that have sold. Some people choose to get an appraisal, and we'll look at an appraisal as opposed to simply a listing you might provide from a local realtor or something like that on a recently sold home. If you're filing based on a recent purchase, we ask that you send your closing statement and an affidavit saying that it's an arm's length transaction. If it's based on an error in the description of the property, for instance, a lot of times the square footage of the property is wrong, and that can have a significant impact on the building portion of the assessment. So if there's a mistake there, we can grant a vacancy, but we need the evidence. We need, if you say your house is 1,000 square feet, but the assessor says it's 1,500 square feet, we need evidence.
Yes.
So you might send in to us a plat of survey, an appraisal, a letter from an architect who's inspected and measured your home, certifying what he says the square footage is. Maybe the architect's drawings, maybe photographs of the interior and exterior damage or exterior of the house, to convey to us what the real square footage is of that property. So we ask that you give us as much as you possibly can, so that there's no doubt in our mind what the real square footage is, and then we'll make an adjustment accordingly. The last thing is vacancy. If something happens, like if you have a fire and you're forced out of the house for 3 or 4 months while you're settling with the insurance company and getting a contractor to come in and repair the fire damage, we can grant a vacancy on the building portion of your assessment for the period of time that you were forced out of the house. But again, we need evidence. So you would want to give us the fire marshal's report, perhaps the insurance paperwork, an affidavit explaining what happened, photographs of the interior and exterior damage to the house, maybe a letter from the village saying that they're pulling your occupancy permit. They're saying to you, you cannot live in that house anymore, it's unlivable. Give us that letter. And then if you've got a subsequent letter saying you may move back in, we know you had to be out on this date, and you're allowed to come back on this date, and that makes it real easy for us. Fire is not the only reason that would cause a vacancy. I live in Wheeling. We have an airport, Chicago Executive Airport. 3 years ago, we got an appeal asking for vacancy from someone whose house was the object of a plane crash. The plane crashed right through the roof of the house. It was a single-family plane, but it made the house unlivable for a while.
Yeah.
So all kinds of things could cause vacancy, and give us the evidence and we can grant a reduction.
Yeah, and Dan, as you're speaking, I'm thinking all the years you've been in this business, the scope of property, it includes everything, and your constant friction with human nature. You must have some great stories. What have you learned over the years?
Well, I've learned that property taxes keep on going up.
Yeah.
They're exerting tremendous financial pressure on everybody, whether you're a residential property owner or a commercial or industrial property owner. I was on the phone on the way here with someone I know, and they told me, they were asking about whether or not they should hire an attorney. They have a commercial property. Now I told them I don't recommend attorneys, because I never want to be in a position where someone thinks I'm favoring one law firm over the other. But he expressed to me, he says he bought his place, it's a jewelry store, in 2002. And his taxes that year were $12,000, and this past year they were $46,000. And he said he's making less money in his business. So that's a lot of pressure on a local businessman who pays a lot of property taxes to his local village and school and park district and library for the ability to run a business there and employ some people. Yeah. And the same thing is true for residential property owners. It used to be that, and I'll use my own parents as an example. They bought their house in Skokie in 1965 for $21,000. In 1985, they sold it for $78,000. So it went up 3.5 times in value in a 20-year period. That was their nest egg. That's not happening anymore.
Yeah.
The house I bought in Wheeling in 2003, I don't think I can sell it for any more than it's worth, and now it is 16 years later.
Yeah.
So property taxes are a crushing burden on people. We're not able at the Board of Review to reduce the overall property tax burden, unfortunately. But what we are able to do is make sure that anyone who files an appeal is paying no more than their fair share. The only way you're going to address property taxes, well, I shouldn't say the only way, but one of the main ways is people have to get a hold of their local taxing districts. And they have to pay attention to who they're voting for on their school board and their village council, because they're the ones that are negotiating the contracts with their employees and paying for new buildings being built and so forth. Unfortunately, a lot of people just don't have a good grasp on that. I can tell you that where I live, there were 2 referendums for raising taxes over and above what the normal limit is. One for the elementary school, one for the community college, and they both passed overwhelmingly, which meant the vast majority of people in my area were saying, I want higher property taxes.
Yeah, I don't realize it is going to show up in their own bill. Well, do you think after all those years there's a better way? Would you have a solution? Because in Illinois we do rely so heavily on property taxes for our
we do.
various bills.
You know, I don't really have a solution. I mean, a solution would be have to be very broad-based. Other states, there are other states where the property taxes aren't nearly as high. Obviously, they tax in different ways, which may be more palatable to people. But right now, as I mentioned just a moment ago, the best way for people to get hold of their property taxes is band together and demand that their local officials, their local elected officials who run their local taxing districts, which is where all of their property taxes go to. They don't go to the state, they don't go to the federal government. They have to demand of those elected officials that they be more fiscally conservative with the money that they have available.
So you're saying 100% of the property tax goes into that area?
It does. And 70% of it goes to your elementary school, your high school, and your community college.
Yeah. There's expensive institutions. It is a huge responsibility. Let's go back to that process where we're appealing our taxes. We think our bill is too high. We're going through the timely process. Can we just wait to pay our bill until the appeal is through and we have the results and the decision comes down?
Well, when you file at the Board of Review, the filing and the adjudication and the result always comes before the second installment tax bill is issued. So you never have to wait. Now, the first installment bill may come. The first installment bill always comes around February 1st, and it's always 55% of the previous year's total taxes. The second installment bill reflects whatever the new assessment is for that year, whether it's a reduction or an increase. It also reflects any of the exemptions you get, like your homeowner, your senior freeze. But that's all done before that tax bill comes out, so you don't have to delay paying the bill while you're waiting for your result. The result's going to be there.
Right. All right. Now, right now, well, I'm thinking before we get to our window being open in our area right now, tell us a little bit more about where the viewers can go for information, and particularly danpatlak.com.
Well, the website danpatlak.com is separate from the official Cook County Board of Review website. And it really serves a different purpose. It gives many more details like the ones I'm discussing with you today on how to go about filing the appeal at the Board of Review and where to get a lot of other good information. So there are links on that website where, for instance, someone might ask the question, how do I know when to file an appeal? Well, when you click on that, there will be 2 answers. One is when to file an appeal at the assessor. You click that, it takes you to the Cook County Assessor's website, right to where the drop-down window is, and it gives you that spot, and it shows you their lineup of townships and when they're opened and closed and so forth. The same is true if you click on the one for the Board of Review, although we don't always know ahead of time because our schedule is dependent upon when the assessor finishes adjudicating of his appeal. So we can't make a determination when we're going to open a township until we see that the assessor has opened and closed and finished with their adjudication of all their appeals. Also, though, on that website, if any of your listeners didn't quite get what I said, you can go on there and there are videos of assessment appeal seminars that I've done. Usually I go out to every community in my district sometime between August and January every year. Last year I did about 40 assessment appeal seminars. And I do a 1-hour seminar, sort of an expanded version of what we're doing today. And then I take questions and answers for 20 minutes. And then if people who are there have further questions, I stay, my staff stays, and we answer the individual questions. Well, what we did is we videotaped one of those seminars, and then we cut the videotape up into separate sections. So for instance, if one of your listeners heard me talking about lack of uniformity, we've got about a 13 or 14 minute video just on lack of uniformity. We've also got 5 minutes on a recent purchase. We've got 7 minutes on vacancy. We've also got some other videos that are very brief, 1 or 2 minutes on, do I have to hire an attorney? Can I file early? Things like that. Yeah. So for anyone that missed anything today, they could just go to that website and learn everything they need to know about how to file an appeal.
Wonderful resource, and we'll have that for you viewers. Anything final that you would want to say? What would your last word be on the whole process of property tax assessment and appeal?
Be diligent. Keep track of what your property taxes are, and especially your assessment, because the assessment is what you're appealing at the Board of Review. So make sure you're checking online every year to see if your assessment's gone up, and make sure you're checking to see if you think it's fair. Now, if you think it's fair, there's no reason to file an appeal. But if you think it's higher than what it should be, for any of the reasons I stated earlier, uniformity, market value, vacancy, error in the description of the property, or recent purchase, then file your appeal at the assessor. And if you miss your chance at the assessor, come to our office at the Board of Review. You can get justice from our office.
And if you don't like your result from the assessor, you can go to the Board of Review also. We know that now.
That's right.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Dan. And our window's open right now here in the Palos area.
It may be open for the assessor. It's not yet open for the Board of Review. But we expect sometime in July or August for Palos Township to open. So I would suggest, again, everyone go to danpatlak.com, sign up for our newsletter, and we will email you when the township opens.
It doesn't get any better than that. Thank you so much, Dan.
Thank you.
We appreciate your wisdom, your insight, for sharing that with us today. Thank you, viewers, for watching, and we will see you next time on Where the Road Rises.